much, first of all, for being here. It's the last slot of today, and I'm pretty sure most of you are tired already. Are you tired already? No? Was it a great conference? So 2/3 of the conference already done. I hope you already enjoyed plenty of the talks and you already learned a lot of stuff, and I'm sure you did. But thank you very much for being here with me, because I know it's not the most agreeable of the timings when probably everyone wants to go and have a beer instead. But I will make it easy and maybe shorter a bit so you can just go and grab a beer afterwards. So we're going to talk today about writing integration tests with Spring Security. You will learn which are your choices and what we should be aware of when we write the tests for our authorization configurations. And I'm just going to say I chose this presentation because, well, you write code and the things that happen is you introduce bugs, and I'm pretty sure you all know this. Well, you might not know me, but in case you do, and in case you don't, maybe I'm Laurentiu. If you do, you probably know me because one of those books, or maybe my YouTube channel that you follow. If you don't follow it already, join and subscribe and like it and share it. And of course, I'm working for Endava, which is a great consultancy company. And because of that, I had a chance to see a lot of projects, which gave me a lot of experience, especially, of course, with Java applications in general. And this is the Spring Security in Action copy, which is one of the paper copies you might get. I just released it about a couple of weeks ago, and it has a few very good reviews from known people such as Josh Long, Anna Maria Michalceanu, Mark Heckler, and not only. And of course, Thomas, I see you here. Where is it? Yeah, you're here. See? On the back of the cover, yeah? This is it. Thank you. Thank you for your review. I don't want to lose a lot of time telling you why tests are important. I'm pretty sure that you already introduced tests into your continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline. I'm pretty sure you are not using Jenkins anymore. Is it anyone using Jenkins anymore? Okay, still some hands up. Doesn't matter now. It's regardless of what the technology you are using, you should at least have tests integrated in an automatic way in which you make sure that everything regarding your application is properly tested every time you push something in your code base. But not only regarding to your code base, but also regarding to the dependencies. And you might have already seen some of the previous talks. And if you did, I think I've seen at least a couple of people stressing out about dependencies in your applications. Why is that important? Because your application, your code bases, you might write 4 lines of code now with a Spring Boot application, but then you end up with 100,000 lines of code because of the dependencies you might not even know you get. No, dependencies were in Thomas' presentation at the beginning of the conference, but it was also Brian who was presenting and stressing this out. Very important to consider our dependencies. And that's also today's talk is about dependencies and about writing integration tests for your authorization with Spring Security. Because you write some code, but the dependencies bring you a lot more. So when you upgrade the dependency, if you don't have proper integration tests with that dependency, then you might end up with bugs, and in case of Spring Security, with vulnerabilities, particularly in case of Spring Security. And you don't want that. So what are the most important things to consider before testing in general? So it's, first of all, understand what exactly are you testing. And then we have 3 ways which we'll discuss today, and I will show also in a demonstration for each of them on how you do that with Spring Security. First using mock users, then using a source for mock users, and the third one is what we do when we have custom authentications. You might have seen yesterday's talk from Daniel presenting the good parts of Spring Security, whichever they are. And those are actually very important for today's talk as well, because you will recognize some of these parts in the examples that I'm going to present. So first of all, you need to make your tests meaningful. That's the first rule of thumb, okay? That's why you need to understand what you are testing. And the most important thing is that when you write Spring Security tests, integration tests, they are for authorizations. So remember that authentication is something that comes before authorization, that you are usually testing with end-to-end tests, not with integration tests, where you can write integration tests, but it doesn't really make sense to test the authentication or authentication methods, because they might be more when you write tests for every endpoint, because the only thing that differs is the authorization configuration, the rules you decide that will either allow someone or not to call that particular endpoint. And if you have been yesterday at Daniel's presentation, you might actually recognize the filter, the manager, the authentication providers, and then we might have or not user detail service or password encoders, depending on what kind of authorization we make. Why is this diagram essential for our today's talk? Because what you see shaded, so the gray part of this diagram, which exists in the backbone of Spring Security design, and which acts in case of the real application doing authentication and authorization, this is not something you test when you write an authorization test. Only the white squares, the non-shaded squares there, the security context, in this case, is meaningful for the test. What you do is you create a security context such in a way in which you fool the test, considering that someone already authenticated. And then for that someone, you provide exactly the context you need to test the authorization for. So you might provide a good context, meaning the attributes and properties for which the authorization should succeed. You should get then, for example, a 200 OK and whatever you think you need to get back. Or you might want to test the cases or multiple cases or even edge cases for which the authorization doesn't succeed. And then you create such a user for which that doesn't work, and you check, you assert at the end of the test that it provides you with the exact expectations. So the first thing that we are going to consider today is using mock users. But I don't really like showing you code on slides, so I'm just going to go to my IDE directly, and I'm going to present you this very small configuration that we are going to test, and let's write ourselves the test and then take a look on the slides, if that's okay with you as well. I forgot to tell you that you can ask questions also during the presentation. So, of course, at the end, you might do that. If you don't want to keep your question up to the end, raise your hand. I'm more than happy to have a discussion with you, not a monologue here, especially because I know you're tired and you might lose me if, or you might simply fall asleep. Anyway, so this is the configuration. I only have a very simple endpoint, and you might recognize the Spring Security 6 configuration. I start here providing the types of authentication. In my case, the application allows authentication through HTTP basic, but form login as well. And then the most important thing that we are discussing about the authorization rules, I'm using the new authorized HTTP requests method and the request matchers. In this particular case, maybe we can start actually by simply assuming that you only need to be authenticated and the user is not essential in this case, who the user is to access or not. And then this very important, this essential part at the end that many of you forget when you write authorization configurations with Spring Security, that's make sure that all the other requests that have been provided are denied. Why you should do that? Because by default they are permitted. And what might happen is that you have a developer, they implement a new endpoint, they simply forget that they should also provide the rules for authorization for that specific endpoint they implement. And if they don't do that, then it will be simply permitted. If you have that line at the end, then the developer, when they will try to test their application, it will not work. So they will somehow be forced to observe that they forgot to write the authorization configurations, if you get what I mean. But that was a parenthesis. So I'm going to the tests now, and I want to test this. We have multiple ways in which we can write integration tests. We can, for example, auto-configure mock MVC, why not, and use mock MVC. So mock MVC, you can simply auto-wire it, and then you write a test. Is this a proper name for a test? What do you think? It's perfect. It's perfect. No, don't laugh. It's perfect. I'm telling you. How do you write the tests? Do you write something like test that authentication, authorization works, blah, 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 blah? How long is the name when you do that? But why do you actually have to write a long name for the test method? I'm struggling to understand that, because I don't do that, honestly. This is how my test name works, at least starting with JUnit 5, with JUnit Jupyter. Because I simply then go and write a display name. And because I have Java 17 plus, I can even use text blocks and describe nicely how and what the test does. And this will even appear in the Jacoco reports or whatever you have there in your Sonar, in your integrations. So why do I need to write a large method name? Someone can explain me? It's years already since I quit writing method names, long method names for tests. I'm just obviously writing here, test that something something and something something. And what will happen? I can even use, given that, I can even use the normal, no, given that the user is correct, then we expect 200, okay. I'm not going to lose time now writing a long description, but normally you might want to write a very specific description. It shouldn't be long, but it should be descriptive to exactly what your test does. But the name of the method is not important. Now let's run it. You will see the description itself appears where it has to appear. You don't have to have a method name that says something. Okay, it's not useful. And come on. Oh man, it's an empty test. Excellent, see? Given that, blah, 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 blah. Good. So I'm testing it. I'm using the mock MVC. I'm performing a get. That's if I correctly remember my demo endpoint. No, it's a get here. And then, and expect status is okay. No, something like that. And okay, throw in the exceptions, and that's it. And what do you think? Will this work? Will this test fail or come green back? It should fail, no? Because normally, according to my configuration, any user has to be at least, any request has to be at least authenticated. But we don't have any authentication. And it's normally it's failing because what we get back is probably a 401 somewhere here or a 403. Anyway, if you look through the logs, you will see a 401. Yeah, makes sense. And then the first thing we can do is use a mock user. And if you add that annotation without any other property, it's more than enough according to at least our configurations now, because what this does, and I'm going back to my diagram, is creating in that security context a user, a mock user, faking the authentication. Since I don't care which are the authorities, roles, username, or any other properties, because the only rule I have is that it should be authenticated, my test should now pass successfully. So that's why I only added the with mock user there. I completely finished the test, and now it's green, okay? Because what my test says is that there is a user in the security context, so it's authenticated, so according to the authorization configuration, everything is fine. Of course, it won't be fine anymore if I add any other rules, like has a specific authority. Then it doesn't work anymore, no? It's obviously, that user doesn't know what admin authority is. But that's why, and of course it's failing now again, but that's why there are also some out-of-the-box things that you can set here, like the roles or authorities, the username, and mostly that's it for a normal mock user, because we use that in the situation where, you know, we have a very simple expectation. So in my case here, you can say, please make such that user, that mock user in the security context is an admin. Or of course, you can provide an entire array of roles or authorities, so according to what you need, and that's working again. That's how you manipulate things using simple mock. This is the simplest of the approaches. And normally, this is what you also see in the most cases used for testing. But there are some cases where this is not enough. So let's continue our discussion. I was here, no? You already saw me doing that, so I'm going to skip over. We use it, and I could have provided the username. It wasn't meaningful for my test, but I have shown you how to provide an authority or an array of authorities. Please. Very good question, actually. So, and a very difficult one. I should have said I don't take the difficult questions. Because I'm using mock MVC here, what I do is I'm testing the contract as well. Of course, there are different ways you can choose, and it depends on what you want to choose when you test your applications. And it's a lot of debate here. How is it correct to write a test? For example, in this case here, is it correct that I've tested the contract together with the integration, security, and maybe even logic, no? Because my endpoint only returns a demo, but I might have had logic, so I might have turned this integration test into something that also goes into the service and only mocks the repositories in a real-world application where I have repositories and I have everything. So I don't want to say that one is wrong and the other is right. I think it really depends on the case here. But the essential is, whenever we write any kind of test, we understand what exactly are we testing there. And we don't write that. I mean, when you write a test, now you know what you are testing there, and you know if that is meaningful for your case. Like in my case here, what I'm testing the fact that the body of the request body is correct. No, I know I don't have a request body here, but imagine a real world application. No, I test the fact that I have all the query parameters. I test so I test the contract itself, because if the contract would not be correct, this test would be failing. No, because I'm using mock MVC. So I'm acting as a client from outside. To be honest, I like this kind of testing, because being from outside, it gives you more flexibility of changing the inside, and that's why normally I'm using mock MVC. But again, we can discuss and debate a little bit more after, but because I don't think it makes sense in all the cases, but in many cases it makes sense. And then, since you are testing also the contract itself, maybe it also makes sense to test the security at the same time. But then you ask, does it then make sense to extend this test and test the business logic as well? Or should I mock my service or whatever class is called from the controller? Again, debatable. Might or might not be what you need. You might want to have separate tests for the services, or you might want to have the same test and give you the flexibility then to more easier refactor. I hope I managed to answer at least a little bit of your question. Thanks. Do you have any? Yeah, please go.
By default, in case of authentication, Spring block everything. And why
So your question is, if I correctly understood, why don't we test the authentication and we do only test the authorization?
So by default, Spring, in case of authentication, it blocks everything. So if you have put Spring security, it will block everything by default.
Okay.
And you have to permit access point. So this is something that vendor will support.
So you are talking about my configuration here. If I can I go to make sure I understand better what you are saying? So you say this one, or at least no, this one, no.
So for example, if you don't configure authorization for now, and just for the authentication, Spring will by default block everything.
No, it won't. I mean, it depends on how you configure it, but.
So for example, if you just put Spring security into your class path, it will block everything.
If you just put Spring Security into your class path, you have a default configuration provided by Spring Boot. But that default configuration is just something that only proves you that Spring Security works in your application. You will never leave it like that. And you will always have to come in Spring Security 6 with this security filter chain bin and reconfigure it, telling exactly what you want. And in that case, it might or might not require authentication. It depends on what you write here, on these rules here. If you don't write, it will be a permit all, and then you will allow everything, for example. No? And in previous versions, we were extending web security configure adapter. I'm pretty sure you are not doing that anymore, so let's keep over. Is that your question? So yes, by default, if I wouldn't have put that bin, I would have gotten a default Spring security filter chain by Spring Boot. But usually I do override providing my own configurations, and then I have to test them accordingly. But it will not secure anything by default.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions? Or do I go to the second approach? The second approach, we use it when we want to get the managed user from somewhere. It's not as often used as the simple mock users approach, but Spring Security gives you the possibility to implement literally a test that finds the users, the mock users it should use in a source, which can be a collection, an endpoint, a database. I would suggest you be careful with using something external, especially when your tests are running in a pipeline. It's not really recommended to call a database, or at least not an external database or an endpoint. But if that's what you need, then Spring Security offers you the flexibility to do that. And in that case, the diagram with the white squares, white rectangles, became a little bit more extended, meaning that it's not only the security context that is meaningful for the test, but also the user details service. The user details service is the component where if we use credentials, if we have authentication based on credentials, username and password, the user details service is the component providing the logic on where the user details are taken from. So usually it might be a database, it might be an LDAP server. Do anyone really still use that anymore? It might be, anyway. And in case of a test, it might be your custom implementation. You might provide exactly what you need for that. And then you can have something like that, which is wrong, not wrong, but not particularly not particularly clear example because of that John there, because it was a copy paste, and you know what happens when you do copy paste programming. No, that was user details. With user details makes sense to be John, but with mock users make sense to be John, but with user details, John would be the name of the user details service bean. And I don't think that you really name your user detail service bean John in an application. And somehow it got that in my book, so it's part of the errata now. just for you to know. Okay, but let's see how would that actually work. Okay, how that works. So if what I want is not a mock user, but a user details service, then I need to implement one. So I'm gonna create a new package, security, and then in this package, I'm going to say custom security, custom user details service, for example. If you want to implement a user details service, you simply have to extend to implement the user details service contract, and its only method that for a username returns an implementation of the user details. Of course, in this case, you can return whatever you want here. Okay, so we can, to make it short, because I don't have all the time in the world and I promised you that I will not keep you here forever. I can have a simple user, for example, created like that. Username, bill, and then authorities, and then returning like that, something like that. Okay, so I have to take it out. I'm sorry, return new one directly. Okay. You register it to the Spring context however you want, either as a bin or as a component. And then what you can do here, I'm gonna copy paste programming again. Don't do that in practice. But then instead of with mock user, I would use a with user details. Now, normally it should even work without even me providing the name of the bin, since this is the only user details bin in my application, but you can use the value for the user and this one for the name of the bin in case you want that. So let me do that. To show that this should actually not work, no? Because the property is admin, if I remember correctly, no? Okay, it doesn't work. Because this is authorities read, but my configuration requires the authority admin. So normally, if I change here to admin, then this one should work. Anyway. And this is the second approach. Well, of course, it might be dummy, in this case, oh, didn't work. It's probably something I misspelled somewhere. Security context, blah, 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 with user details. A value of the user, it's user, and I think in my case it was bill. No, it searches by default by user. You can tell it to search for some specific user if you want, but in my case that user didn't exist because mine was called bill. Anyway, doesn't matter. Details, you understood. And normally when we implement it, you don't implement a static in memory because it doesn't make sense. So what I did here is the same as using with mock user, no? When you use the second approach, use the second approach to take your users from somewhere, from a file, from a database, from an endpoint, from an LDAP server, from when you need that, that's the approach. That's offering you, it's offering you the extensibility again. Again, didn't work, but I will probably skip over because it's again something that I probably didn't. I missed here probably in my so value user. It's now there, but something is different. But you trust me, it's working normally. Not to lose all the time. I want to also show you the last approach, which is the custom authentication. And if you were there yesterday when Daniel was presenting the filters and the implementation, and there were 5 points in his presentation, if you weren't there, I recommend you review the recording of that presentation. One of the fourth or the fifth points was implementing your own authentication, because that sometimes is sometimes something that you need to do. You sometimes need to implement your own custom approach, and then using the default authentication objects provided by SPILCA, it's not anymore something that helps you. But what happens if you have really an application that for any reason implemented a custom authentication? In that case, this will not work anymore, because neither the with mock user or with user details would provide you that specific kind of object which is implemented by your application. It can't know. With mock user and with user details cannot know that specific, that particular kind of authentication that you created. And then what you have to do is provide a factory object that defines the security context. So you have the flexibility of not only mocking the user, but the security context it's all. And sometimes this happens, for example, today if we use an OAuth 2 OpenID Connect approach, which is common and pretty much often found in your application, in your applications, because you get that JVT and then you have to enhance somehow your authentication object with different attributes that are not necessarily are particular, are not general attributes. Like the JVT might contain some claims which are specific to your application, and then you are forced to create a custom authentication. And then how do you test that case? It will not work anymore with mock user or with user details. And then you need to create this custom annotation of yours. You will create a custom annotation and then a factory, and that factory will provide a security context which will use your particular authentication. And I will not be able to finish completely this example, but I will tell you, at least I will try to show you the steps. So let's assume that you have something like custom authentication, which in order to be a custom authentication, we'll have to implement the authentication contract.
Sorry, but equally you're saying that would be a authentication object.
It could be, yeah. It could be, but imagine that you have. So what you asked is that could this be, for example, an OAuth 2 authentication token, for example? I think that's how it's called, the class for OAuth 2. It can be, but it can be even something that derives from that, something that you have customized from that. Anyway, at the same point somewhere, it will still implement authentication. Now, the easiest for me in this demonstration, so that I don't add other dependencies, is just to prove it by implementing directly the authentication object. So you do something like that, okay? And I'm not going to implement it, because again, it would take me a lot more time than the 10 minutes I still have. But then you just create your custom user. I don't know, you can name it whatever you want. It needs to be an annotation, and then it needs to, of course, have the runtime retention. Recommended a target. It's not mandatory to have a target, but usually we do present with a target. And then if you create your custom annotations, this can provide you with specific thing like, I don't know, you have a profile picture that comes as a base64. My recommendation, never do that in a JVT token, but it might happen, okay? Real life is jungle out there, so you don't know what happens. If you need something like that, and say you have something like that, and we can even put a default for that, just to avoid forcing us to give it. And then you create your custom security context factory, no? And this is where you simply say how the security context is created. And say, please use my custom user annotation. And this returns a security context. No, so you just create a security context, security context holder should be here, empty context, you fill in the empty context whatever you want, which can be your custom objects, and then you return the context. And then you will simply be able to create your test by using the custom user annotation, which can have the profile picture, whatever. It's essential for you to have here. And that's how you can inject in the tests, in the integration test with Spring Security, custom attributes. Because there is no other way in which you can inject the custom attributes, considering you need them. If you don't need them, fine. But if you need to have a custom implementation for your authentication and even have custom attributes, then this is the only way in which we can do that. This third approach that allows you to completely tell your application how to create the security the mock security context. Okay, and I'm done. I told you I will be faster, and now I will just spend the rest 10 minutes I have to give you the books. But before that, I want to make you attentive about the Vox de Excluge, which just opened their call for papers. And since I'm a great supporter of our Romanian Java community, I want to advise you to apply with a call for paper or attend. In case you don't want to be a speaker, you can simply attend. And besides the great content of our presentations, I also want to tell you that you have things to do. Cluj is one of the nicest cities in Romania, so aside for the nice view, you can pet a bear. I don't recommend you pet the bear, but you can try that. Others tried, didn't end well. You can try yourself, tell us what happens. But yeah, I do advise you do that. And to the bear. Okay, I thought you like the bear. You have the chance to see a lot of them if you are coming. Okay, cool. So I finished, and let's do like that. I will take the other questions, and then I'm gonna randomize. So I see a lot of hands. So I have hand there. I will repeat the question because I've heard it. So thank you for the mic. What about Webflux? Because in my examples here, I have only discussed about the normal approach and not the reactive one. Well, it will work with mostly the same thing, except the third approach. That is the security context, which is a reactive security context in general. To be honest with you, I've never tried the third approach with a reactive application. With mock user will work. With user detail service will work. And of course, it will expect, in that case, an implementation of a reactive user detail service, which will return a mono of user details and not a user details. But I don't think that there is a way to create your custom annotation, although I will check that. Yeah, thank you for the question. I saw another hand at some point, or not. Okay, is there any other question? Okay, in that case, thank you very much for being attentive to my presentation. And in case you haven't scanned already the QR code, please do that. And I'm gonna just generate some random values together with you here. And I have, like, my Spring Security in Action is the most known of the books. Spring Start here is the best of them according to feedback. And Troubleshooting Java is just a book I wrote. But I still think it has great content, so I mean, I do recommend it, and it has good feedback as well. So I'll take them in order. I will just give first the Spring Security in Action, then the Spring Start here, and then the Troubleshooting Java for the three numbers. Can I go to the randomize? Okay, let's do like that. We are software developers. We can write our own code to randomize, no? And try JShell. Are you going to help me? Should I use math random? Should I use random from Java util? Never do that. Secure random ChatGPT. even not the best choice, no? Okay, so do use that's another talk, but do you secure random in case you want a real random value, because secure random uses the entropy of your operating system. Don't use the random class from Java util or math random for that, okay? At least don't use it if what you want is a real random value. If you know that you have for your application running in a container and you don't have entropy, that's not a different story, but again, secure random is what you should use for generating random values. So I need the next int, and then I have to see how many of you did here. Many, okay? Many, like that. Many. Last one, 43. Okay, let's do that. 43. 44 in that case. No, it's 0 to 43. Okay, yes, I need to... Oh man, I hate that. System out print line Java. Okay, so the first one should be 14. Okay, let's see who is 14 here. Thomas, are you here with us? Perfect. You can come and get your Spring Security in action. And if you want, after I can give you also the signature. If you want, only if you want, yeah. Then 42, wow. Who is 42? See, he's the last one here, no? No, it's actually Sebastian. Your Spring Star here. Thank you. Thank you. So, we have Sebastian. Excellent. Yay! Thunder's applause. And the last one? 36. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And 36 is... Manuel. Thank you everyone. Okay, and with that, I end up my presentation. I hope you had an excellent second day at Devoxx UK. I hope I will see you at other conferences as well. Follow me on social media, and of course, if you have questions, I'm still here and I can answer them. Thank you, everyone.